Hi, I'm CJ and this is my RC channel. In this series of videos, I'm going to be building a Street Eliminator class drag racer. This class, Street Eliminator, is based on any two-wheel drive short course truck. That has to be the base chassis. From there you can modify it pretty much any way you want, any type of motor. The only restrictions are a 2S battery. The tires have to be rubber, not foam, and the body has to cover all 4 tires, and you have to have 4 functioning shock absorbers. I'm going to be narrowing the chassis by swapping out the short course truck arms for some buggy arms, and I'm going to be doing the mid-engine setup. This is a TLR 22. It's a great way to go if you can get your hands on one of these used and you want to race in that Eliminator class, because it allows you to either go mid-engine or rear. And mid-engine definitely has its advantages because the rotation of the motor puts a certain amount of downforce onto the chassis, putting more weight on the tires. A lot of people are using the old TLR's short course trucks to do exactly this. I spec'd out ceramic bearings for the transmission. I'm not going to bother with ceramics for the things like the front wheels, but the entire transmission is going to be all ceramic. How to rebuild a ball differential properly. I believe I mentioned that the cost of these was like $12 to $15, and the thrust bearing was like another $5 to $7. So, you know, $20 to $25 to upgrade to all ceramic bearings in your differential. That's a huge difference right there, because the smooth differential action is very, very important to maintaining traction in corners and cornering smoothly. If it's operating inconsistently, that's going to have dramatic performance issues that you're not necessarily going to recognize. Your car just won't handle well, and you won't necessarily be able to put a finger on why it is. Anytime I work on differentials, I generally lay down a towel like this. These are you can get them at auto parts store. It is a microfiber towels. I'll just pull out a fresh one. They're cheap. You can get big packages of them for like $10, and it doesn't, transfer any lint, so you can work on your differential without having stuff get into the diff and clog it up, and also you can work with your bearings without them escaping on you. One of the nice things about these TLR diffs, and hopefully a lot more manufacturers are doing this, these rings are polished ahead of time. One of the steps that I always used to do in builds was I would start by taking a couple of different grades of sandpaper, like some 400 and some 600 and some 800, and I would take the female diff out drive, put a ring on it, take a totally flat surface like a flat piece of machined metal or a thick sheet of glass, or a piece of marble from like a trophy base, something like that, something that is going to give me a very flat surface and a hard surface, and hold the sandpaper down on that, put the diff ring on here, moisten up with a little bit of oil, and then rotate around, just kind of scrub it, and basically sand down the diff ring, smoothing it out, getting rid of any imperfections. And you would see those imperfections right away, that there would be like high spots and low spots where the sandpaper wasn't making contact, and basically you just kept polishing and polishing until you didn't see high and low spots, and then you go to the finer and finer sandpaper until you get a nice polish, and that way you have a smooth, even surface. But you don't have to do that these days. TLR, since the advent of the original short course truck, started giving you machined rings. That's why they're packed in a little bit of grease, and they're basically ready to go. And you can see which side you want to put outward. It's got, you can see the machining. There's like little crisscrossing lines. So I'm just going to go ahead and wipe this off. That looks like our surface right there. So I'm going to take their Diff lube, I'm going to put just a little bit on this inner machined surface. That just helps it hang on there while you're working. Now that'll probably just pop out on me while I'm working. Put that in a minute. I can go ahead and slide the one into the female side here. I wish I had two diffs to show you the difference, but you'll just have to take my word for it. Basically what I'm doing is I'm filling each of these little bearing holes with some grease. Okay, so you see it hasn't really pushed through. There's just a blob on each of them. And so then I'm just going to take the bearings one at a time. And with the tip of your fingernail, just push it into the hole. And it's okay if you pick up more than one. Sometimes the diff grease on your finger will catch one of the bearings. Just roll it over to the next hole and press it into place. Okay. So now we can just kind of smooth the grease around on both sides. You don't want to overdo it. You just want them all to have a little bit of grease and a little film around the edge. So now we can put our bearing in. Okay, now the side that you put this in, the screw in, is important. Just remember, okay, that's the female side right there. So that's our threaded side. And one thing you want to do anytime you're using a new spring, if it's a rebuild and you're reusing the same spring, you don't need to do this. But a brand new spring, you want to take a pair of pliers and just give it a quick squeeze. Just gonna pause for one moment. Okay. You know what? I'm just gonna cut that. Damn Ziploc. Being a pain in my neck. Okay. So here is our thrust bearing, and we definitely are going to want to lubricate this. And I'm going to use some black grease on this. Diff grease is a little thicker. Okay, now just again confirming that is the male side. So this side, we are going to drop our spring in. And then we're going to, this is our retaining bolt. Get that squeezed in. And this is kind of like a dust cap kind of arrangement. So this will be easier with the wrench on it. Is that? No, it's not. Okay, where's the wrench hiding? There we go. See, nice smooth diff action. I can ease up on that a little bit. Now you will tighten and loosen that as needed, depending on the type of driving you're doing. And considering this is going to be drag racing, having it be tighter is better. There we go. That's nice and smooth. May tighten that up later. I may also experiment by building a locker, and I'll talk about how I might do that in a moment. So now I'm just taking that little dust cap that I talked about a minute ago and sliding that into place. Okay, now a good way to, when you're tightening your diff, if you need to, sometimes you can just hold onto the outdrive if your hands are tired and you don't want to do that. Just take a thin wrench and slide it through the outdrive like that, and then you can work on it with you know, a wrench and make adjustments. So these washers just gonna get saved in that bag of parts. Okay, so now I can okay, I need to refer to the directions for a moment. I want to make sure that I'm putting this in the correct side. because there's a specific side you want to put it in for you don't want it being able to loosen itself, as it were. And mid-engine is should be the opposite direction. Okay, and I was correct. They want it on the right side of the vehicle. Oops, these things just slide right off. See, unlike plastic gears, these bearings aren't like pressed into the gear. If you tip it over, they'll just slide right out. So, okay, there's my bolt. So that's going to go in the right side, which is this side over here. So now to lubricate these gears, it takes very little lube to do this. I usually just put a couple, like 3 or 4 spots, just put a little dabble of grease, and that will work its way to all the gears as it rotates. And you'll see that it just works its way through all of them, and that's plenty. You don't want a lot of grease. Too much grease and you're just slowing down your transmission. It's just unnecessary. You just want to lubricate it, and since this is sealed, it's not going to be losing it. So now I can cap this off. I've got my bearings there and there. That is nice and smooth. And I decided to start out without the clutch. So this is a locker. In other words, there's no slipper clutch mechanism at all. There's basically a little spider that's on the back side of here with 3 metal, well, 3 prongs sticking up off of the spider that go into these 3 holes. This is a different size gear. And then you cap it off and tighten down the nut, and you're in business. So one nicely rebuilt transmission. So I'm going to go ahead and put in assorted bolts, and then bolt this down onto the chassis here, and I'll catch up with you at the next interesting part where I've got a lesson for you. Always save these, because the next time you need to rebuild your transmission, you've got everything you need. And periodically you should service your diff. If you know, I don't know, you know, it depends on the type of racing you're doing, or if you're bashing, you know, the environment. I would say, like, I don't know, every 10 or 20 hours of usage, maybe. Might not be a bad idea to tear down the transmission, disassemble the diff, clean it, put in fresh lube. Again, that's kind of up to you. It depends on how much performance you're trying to get out of the vehicle, what long-term reliability you want, things of that nature. So, okay, I'm having to do a little reshooting. I'm having some camera trouble. Maybe it's overheating. I'll worry about that later. I'm just trying to sort this out. So I'm just going to reshoot what I just did, and we'll see where it comes out. I'm putting together the rear end now. These plastic nuts are going to come off. Those are just on there as a placeholder to keep this assembly where it is while I'm putting things together. That is one of the things about the TLR. You've got a lot of parts that unless they're all together at one time, everything kind of just falls apart. But because I am missing a little screw down here in the base plate. In any event, I'm using the 3mm spacer down here. So that is lifting the axles. It's basically like a caster for the rear, sort of. I'm also using a 3.5 degree low roll center rear plate. That's 3.5 degrees of rear toe, which is a lot, but the idea is to keep the car tracking in a straight line. You know, you don't want the car to weave on you or slide off to one side or the other. So I'm going to see how this does. I may end up taking a lot of that out and going to like 2.5 degrees. I may go up as high as 4. Right now I've got a 3.5 degree plate in here, and I'm going to see how that does for me. If I was running a locker, I would probably use the minimum amount of rear toe. It just wouldn't be necessary. But since I am using a ball differential, I want to I want to have that toe and start with that and see how that goes. Because if you can't keep the car going straight, you're going to back off the throttle, you're going to be steering, and you're going to get a bad run. So the idea is to set the car up so that you can launch and just go straight ahead as fast as the motor will wind up without the car deviating off to one side or the other. And there's a lot of ways to adjust suspension to deal with that type of situation, and I will cover that all during some tuning videos. But as far as initial setup, some toe in the rear is going to help the car track in a straight line. So, and I also, there was something very important I wanted to talk to you about when you're building transmissions. These cases, the plastic is surprisingly soft, and it has a certain amount of flexibility, and if you over tighten these, you will literally compress the case and you'll bind up your transmission. Your transmission should be nice and smooth like this. If it isn't, you should back off these bolts a little bit until you get everything nice and loose again, or at least it should be as loose as it would be if you were just holding it together without any screws in place and you were spinning the drive. If it gets tighter than that, it means you're binding it up. And because these are threaded into plastic, they're not going to loosen up. So it's not a matter of you know, if I don't tighten it down, it's going to back out on me. No, it's in plastic. It's like Loctite. It's not going anywhere. You can back off on them as much as you need to not be stressing that case and binding up your transmission, because that will not only will it ruin your performance, but you'll burn out the motor, you'll damage gears, you'll do all kinds of damage, because you're basically you're clamping down on the rotating parts and preventing them from turning freely. It's the exact opposite of everything you're trying to accomplish. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and take these nuts out, put the drive on, and the rear, this is the rear shock mount, and holds the suspension uprights. It does a variety of things. Position mounting for the rear sway bar, etc. So I'm gonna stop the video, get this done, and come back. Now, anytime you're building any of these cars, whether it's scratch up or whether you're doing a mod like I'm doing, you always want to make sure that your suspension is fluid. If you lift up an arm up like this and you release and it doesn't drop right back down, if it's slow at all, you need to take it apart. You need to figure out where it's rubbing. You can get tools called a reamer that you can auger out the plastic arms, things like that to get a fluid motion going. I had to do several attempts at setting up these arms because the spacing is a little different between the 22 short cars truck and the 5th generation of the buggy. So the arms fit. You just need to line up some spacers, and you know, getting that that distance correct so that the arm moved smoothly at the same time, wasn't, you know, jiggling. You know, that took a little trial and error, but you know, you put it together, you take it apart, you put it together, you take it apart until you get it right. And there's just there's no substitute for taking your time. So I've got the 2 arms on. I've got the suspension, the transmission locked down. I've got a few more bolts to put in here, and then I'm gonna put in my new linkages and work on my out drives. So it's coming together quite nicely. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please click like and please subscribe to my channel.